The thing I want to talk to you about today is this notion of data made flesh. But what do I mean by data made flesh? Well, I want to talk to you about the relationship between information and living bodies, or at least bodies that are alive, artificially alive, or exhibit a perhaps liveness. The title of my talk, Data Made Flesh, is attributed to the cyberpunk novelist William Gibson and can be understood in relation to perhaps one of the following. Either the cybercultural concern with the obsolescence of the bipedal breathing human body that can't deal with the speed and complexity of the hyper-threading processes of modern connectivity, or perhaps the machinic systems and networks as bodies themselves, as perhaps Deleuze or Manuel Castells would advocate, or more recently and perhaps most poignantly for this talk, the idea that the modern developments are providing us with the tools and capabilities that, in actual fact, use information technologies to generate new forms of flesh or perhaps fleshly experience. But what I want to explore today is the point of collision between these different provocations, a collision that allows us to ask, could a body of information legally own an artificial flesh body? In other words, can an artificial person own, desire, or even create artificial organs? But I want to start with Harry Beck, who in 1931 created a map that was going to fundamentally change the way we thought about the London Underground. You see, Harry Beck was an engineer who realized that what people care about when they're underground is the relationship between the stations. They didn't care about the geographical relationship of the stations. They cared about the topographical relationship of the stations. And we could use the tube map as a metaphor for how we translate our own identities onto networks of connections based on the biases of social networks. We reduce the complexity of a person to a series of information represented by nodes and interconnections. But the question remains, if London was destroyed tomorrow, let's hope it's not, and the only surviving documentation is the London Underground tube map, could we rebuild London? Well, no. So what's lost in that process of translation from one substrate or medium to another? And one wonders what also is lost when you construct what philosopher of information Luciano Floridi calls your inf-org, connected informational organism, the thing that we create every time we press share, post, or like. You see, social networks are a form of what Merlin Donald called external symbolic storage, a way of expressing ourselves in information. Here we've got Nicholas Felton's FELTRON reports, an expression of all his activities in durations and quantified. He's creating a media clone. And as Robin Sloan shared in his 2010 essay, Kanye West, Media Cyborg, media lets you clone little pieces of yourself and send them out into the world to have conversations on your behalf. Even while you're sleeping, your media, your books, your blog posts, your tweets, it's on the march. It's out there trying to make connections. Mostly it's failing, but that's okay because these days copies are cheap. Indeed, copies are cheap. But this notion of a copy in digital or binary information format has been most recently popularized by Martine Rothblatt in her book Virtually Human, The Promise and Peril of Digital Immortality. In this book, she refers to the continued advances in software and the rise to a level of cognitive intelligence or perhaps artificial consciousness. She talks about cyber-conscious people, the theoretical product of translating the activity of the human biological brain into the substrate of silicon, and thus she calls them mind clones. And to express her vision, she has developed a prototype clone of her wife, Bina. But you see, like many transhumanists, Rothblatt's preoccupation with the preservation and representation of the brain negates the rest of the body. In fact, here, Bina 48 is actually just a head, and a really troublingly uncanny head as well. And as a conversational agent, Bina relies on BNA, or beam neural architecture. Beams being the smallest units of beingness that comprise our sense of self and include mannerisms, personality, recollections, feelings, beliefs, attitudes, and values. Although it should be noted that BNA is a speculative term and is a yet-to-be-determined set of mindware that enables our sense of self to be digitally realized and to transcend the body. So if we transcend the body, then what happens to the body? Well, whilst transhumanists subscribe to the continuity thesis of the brain, it's generally accepted that the body can be replaced on whole without any dramatic effect to the psychology of the person. Now, in conversation with certain amputee friends of mine, I would beg to differ. But despite this, transhumanist designer Natasha Vita-Moore offers a radical upgrading of the body with her speculative primo-post-human design, a myriad of improvements on the original. Her design is either there to allow the gradual replacement of the original body organ by organ and thus prolongs the personhood, or it allows for the existence of maybe multiple clones, or perhaps it provides an escape vessel on the nearing of death. In this case, the original is presumably destroyed or perhaps even frozen through, say, cryonics to allow for access to the stem cells in the future. You see, both these transhumanist visions, Primo Post-Human and Bina 48, presuppose an original. And it is with this reference to the original that the quality of the copy will be judged. So what if there's no original? Which is where I'd like to introduce the idea of the infomorph, as defined by Russian AI researcher Alexander Cheslenko. The infomorph has no permanent body, and I would suggest it has never had a permanent body. Its morphology is information. But you see, can these artificial entities with no human original ever become a person? We see artificial persons already exist in society today, and this is revealed in Heath Bunting's The Status Project, that reveals that personhood emerges from the human being's relationship to their objects of measurement. For example, passports, ID cards, library cards, mobile phone numbers, information about our health. In other words, human beings have mutated into networked information-carrying beings and thus become legal citizens or natural persons. These natural persons are transferable bundles of rights and duties that can be attached to a human being. But Bunting's project also reveals a process that allows for what Ben was referring to, artificial persons. You see, could we create a artificial person with similar legal rights of a natural person that has the ability to own, for say, organs? And we could apply this back to zygotic personhood. I'll jump over this very quickly, but the idea of the zygotic personhood is a person exists as soon as they've got a heartbeat. Some philosophers have quashed this on the basis that the fetus needs some sort of cerebral activity or reason or awareness, but surely the notion of cybernetic personhood presupposes that awareness. That's the inherent assumption. In this case, could it stand that an entity with a cybernetic personhood could gain legal status acting as an artificial person? This would give this cybernetic person the ability to own property. So what then might be, then the question is, what would a cybernetic person want to own? Well, perhaps a body. And how might an artificial person with cybernetic personhood go about acquiring a biological body? Well, through artificial organs, because there's already 3D printed ears, cochlear implants, artificial limbs, artificial eyes, artificial hearts, artificial kidney, 3D printed kidneys even, artificial livers. And the amalgam of these have been explored by the artist Revertal Cohen in her project, The Immortal, which is a closed circuit of different life support apparatus that pretends to be a body. And I can say a lot more about this, but the key point is the fact that at the moment it doesn't have a brain, it doesn't have intention. But what if it could have a extended body through brain-machine interface? Could this, as it currently stands, hold the promise for the restoration? As it currently stands, holds the promise of the restoration of body mobility in patients suffering from devastating motor deficits caused by brain injury, neurological diseases, and limb loss. The current developments offer the possibility of a whole body BMI. These require, large-scale brain recordings, advanced decoding algorithms for it to interface with the brain. Of course, this sort of system might actually be ideal for non-human cybernetic person to be the host. In addition, an artificial person might have the ability to own multiple bodies and then is not limited to a single location. And to conclude, we have to think, what sort of body could this artificial person have? Let's not forget that it's a fallacy to assume that an infomorph with a status or legal status of an artificial person would desire a body designed in the image and likeness of its so-called predecessor, us. After all, our modern age reveals, and clearly this conference here today reveals, a human species so eager to point out their weaknesses and inadequacies. Instead, we must allow for a differentiated being.
People who need people.